Your choice reveals a recurring pattern, not because a violin is magical, but because the mind speaks through symbols before it speaks through explanations. Jung understood that what draws you in at first glance often carries a hidden emotional truth, a feeling that has been moving inside you for longer than you realize, waiting for an image strong enough to bring it closer to the surface. A violin is a powerful symbol for this, because it only creates music through tension in its strings, and people are not so different. What remains unnamed still vibrates inside you. It can become pressure, silence, longing, irritation, distance, or a strange heaviness you cannot fully explain. That is why this Jungian test matters. It is not about choosing what looks best. It is about noticing what reaches you first, before the social mask steps in, before logic begins to edit what the deeper self is trying to reveal. So take a quiet breath, look at the 5 violins, and choose one from 1 to 5 without overthinking it. Stay with your first impression. Do not change it because it seems too obvious, too dramatic, too dark, or too soft. In Jung's test, the first pull is often more honest than the polished answer, because the psyche tends to recognize itself before the mind has time to interfere. And by the end, I will connect your choice to something concrete you can do in real life, a practical step that gives this insight weight and direction, so this becomes more than a moment of curiosity. Only at the end will the deeper meaning of your choice become fully clear, when the pattern beneath it is finally brought into words. But before we go further, pause the video and leave your name in the comments, because when you place your name beside your choice, this stops being just a passing image and begins to carry meaning for you. If you chose option 1, this usually happens when your emotion arrives as heat before it arrives as language. Stay with me, because this matters more than it seems. What draws you to the fire violin is not only intensity, it is recognition. It is the part of you that has learned to turn feeling into force, pressure, movement, reaction. In Jungian terms, this often points to a shadow emotion that was never given a safe name, so instead of being spoken, it becomes energy. It becomes speed. It becomes edge. It becomes that inner flame that keeps you going and keeps you guarded at the same time. Pay attention to this. Fire is not only anger. Fire is also pain that wants protection. Fire is also love that was not received properly. Fire is also the old reflex of becoming strong before anyone can see that something hurt. That is why this choice often belongs to a person with a warrior archetype on the surface and a more tender truth underneath. The light side of this pattern is courage, vitality, presence, and the ability to act when others freeze. You can bring momentum into heavy places. You can protect, decide, carry, endure. But the shadow side is quieter and more important to see. Sometimes you call it stress when it is actually sorrow. Sometimes you call it irritation when it is actually disappointment. Sometimes you say you are just tired, but what you really feel is unseen. This is how the unnamed emotion hides. Not by disappearing, but by changing clothes. Here is a concrete example. Someone makes a small comment that sounds dismissive. Outwardly, it is nothing dramatic. You keep moving. You answer well. You stay functional, maybe even more productive than usual. But for the rest of the day, your body feels sharp. Your chest is tight. Your patience gets thinner. Little things bother you more than they should. That is not weakness. That is a signal. The fire in you is trying to speak, but it has learned that pure vulnerability is risky, so it comes forward wearing armor. Jung would say the psyche always seeks balance. What is buried returns in another form. So if you were taught, directly or indirectly, that softness was dangerous, your emotional truth may now appear through intensity, and yet there is a gift hidden in this. The fire violin does not mean you are broken. It means your feeling is alive. It means your system still knows how to respond, how to defend, how to care deeply enough to react. The real work is not to extinguish the fire. The real work is to understand what it protects. Read that again, inwardly. Not what it destroys, what it protects. That changes everything. Because the moment you see that your sharpness may be guarding hurt, your pattern begins to loosen. And once it loosens, you gain choice. Not less power, better power. Not less intensity, cleaner intensity. Today, the next time you feel a fast emotional surge, stop for 2 minutes before speaking or texting anyone. Place one hand on your chest and write exactly one sentence in your notes that begins with these words. What hurt me was. Then finish the sentence without editing it. If you choose option 2, this message usually appears when one part of you wants contact, honesty, warmth, and relief, while another part pulls everything back into silence, control, and distance. Stay with me here, because this blue violin is not cold in a simple way. It is charged. It carries the feeling of lightning held inside glass, emotion turned into precision, tenderness translated into restraint. In Jungian language, this often points to a shadow pattern built around protection. The outer self becomes clear, calm, even elegant, while the deeper self keeps its real weather hidden. That is the conflict. Desire says, move closer. Fear says, stay unreadable. Desire says, say what you felt. Fear says, make it smaller, cleaner, safer. Pay attention to that tension, because it shapes more of your life than you think. People who choose this violin often do not lack feeling. They feel a great deal, but somewhere in the past, feeling too much may have seemed dangerous, embarrassing, or useless, so the psyche learned a clever mechanism. Instead of drowning, it froze. Instead of asking, it observed. Instead of trembling openly, it became composed. The gift in this is real. You may be perceptive, disciplined, able to think clearly in emotional situations, able to hold yourself together when others fall apart. That is not weakness. That is a skill, but the shadow of that skill is costly. Sometimes your calm face hides a crowded inner room. Sometimes you tell yourself you are fine, when in truth you are disappointed, lonely, or quietly hurt. And because the feeling is not named, it does not leave. It lingers like blue light after a storm. Here is a simple scene. You receive a message from someone who matters to you. Their words are brief, distant, almost careless. You feel the shift immediately. Your stomach drops for 1 second. Your mind starts working at once. Maybe they are busy. Maybe it means nothing. Maybe you are overreacting. You type a real reply, then erase it. You replace it with something light, reasonable, almost polished. The conversation moves on, but your body does not. Hours later, you are still there inside it, replaying tone, timing, meaning. This is the mini-climax hidden in your pattern. The moment was small, but the unsaid emotion became larger because it had nowhere honest to go. Jung would say what remains in shadow does not disappear. It waits. It returns through mood, distance, fatigue, overthinking. So this choice does not reveal emptiness. It reveals defended sensitivity. It reveals a heart that learned to survive by cooling itself before anyone could touch the wound directly. And once you see that, something begins to loosen. Not all at once, but enough. Enough for a different ending. Today, spend 15 minutes alone with your phone on airplane mode. Write down one recent moment that made you withdraw. Name the exact feeling you avoided in that moment. Then send one honest sentence to the person involved, or, if that is not possible, read that sentence out loud to yourself without changing a single word. If you could choose 3, it is often because some quiet part of you is tired of pretending that softness means certainty. This choice usually carries a hidden emotional logic. You are drawn to beauty when something inside you feels unresolved, and you are drawn to warmth when another part of you is afraid of what might happen if you stop holding everything together so carefully. Stay with me, because this is where the pattern begins to show itself. The violin with flowers around it does not speak first about romance. It speaks about emotional presentation. It speaks about the persona that knows how to appear gentle, composed, understanding, and easy to love, even when the deeper self is still full of questions it has not dared to ask aloud. In Jungian terms, this often points to a schema built around harmony, a learned way of staying connected by being pleasing, patient, or beautifully contained. But the shadow hiding underneath that persona is not ugliness, it is avoidance. It is the avoidance of conflict, the avoidance of disappointment, the avoidance of choosing too clearly in case the choice reveals that not everyone will stay. Pay attention to this because it can shape entire seasons of your life. You may think you are being careful, but often you are being divided. One part of you already knows what it wants. Another part delays the decision until the moment passes and calls that delay wisdom. Here is the unexpected twist. The longer you remain undefined, the more your life starts getting decided by other people. That is why this choice often appears when someone has learned to protect the heart by remaining emotionally graceful while inwardly uncertain. The grace is real. The tenderness is real. The ability to sense what others feel is real. But when the gift is ruled by fear, it becomes a trap that looks beautiful from the outside. Think about an ordinary scene. At work, you know a project is draining you, and you know you should either renegotiate the deadline or say clearly that the task no longer fits your role. In a relationship, you know a conversation needs to happen because mixed signals have been stretching your hope and your patience for too long. In daily life, you know exactly which promise to yourself you keep postponing, whether it is the application, the message, the ending, the beginning, the decision that has been waiting for your full yes. Yet instead of choosing, you refine the tone, soften the edges, wait for a perfect moment and tell yourself that more clarity will come later. See what happens next. Later becomes another week, then another month, and the feeling you could not name at first starts turning into quiet resentment toward your own life. That is the deeper emotional truth behind this violin. The unnamed feeling is often not love and not sadness alone. It is the ache of self-betrayal disguised as patience. Jung would say the psyche keeps returning to the same pattern until consciousness catches up. So this is your moment to catch up. Not by becoming harder, and not by rejecting your softness, but by letting softness become honest instead of decorative. Your heart does not need less beauty, it needs more decision. Your sensitivity does not need less depth, it needs a clearer direction. Once that happens, the persona relaxes, the avoidance weakens, and the self no longer has to hide inside charm, delay, or emotional elegance. Today, choose one decision you have postponed for more than 7 days. Set a timer for 15 minutes, write down the exact commitment you have been avoiding, then complete one visible step before the timer ends. Send the message, accept the date, decline the request, confirm the plan or mark the task on your calendar with a fixed hour so your inner promise becomes outer reality. If you chose 4, this usually happens when the part of you that wants peace keeps fighting with the part of you that believes peace is dangerous, because letting go feels too close to losing something you cannot afford to lose. Stay with this tension. This violin does not call to people who feel nothing. It calls to people who feel deeply, but have learned to hold themselves tight around that depth. The dark shape, the ritual mood, the almost sacred heaviness around it all point to the same inner mechanism. Control becomes a form of protection. Restraint becomes a private religion. And what looks like strength from the outside is often fear dressed in discipline. In Jungian terms, this is a shadow pattern linked to limitation, to the old belief that change arrives with a cost and that surrender invites pain faster than safety. So the psyche narrows its movements, it watches, it prepares, it keeps one hand on the door even in a quiet room. Pay attention to this because you do this more often than you tell yourself. You may call it being careful, you may call it standards, self-respect, discernment, good instincts. Sometimes it is all of that, but sometimes it is something simpler and more human. Sometimes it is the fear that if you relax, speak too honestly, trust too much, or choose too clearly, something important will slip away. That is why this choice often belongs to someone who has lived through a rupture, a disappointment, a betrayal, or just enough instability to make uncertainty feel personal. The gift in this pattern is real. You can sense what others miss. You notice small shifts in tone. You protect what matters. You do not hand your heart away carelessly. But the shadow has its price. You can remain in situations that are already finished because ending them feels like surrender. You can keep people at a measured distance and later wonder why closeness never feels natural. You can hold so firmly to what once mattered that you block what is trying to enter now. Here is a simple, everyday scene. A message sits on your phone. You have read it 3 times. You already know the answer. A part of you wants to say yes and move forward, or say no and end the tension. But instead you wait. You revise the wording in your head. You keep the situation open, because openness feels safer than commitment. Yet the truth is the opposite. The open door keeps draining your energy. This is one of the ways your hidden fear works. Not through drama, but through prolonged hesitation. Jung would say that what remains in shadow rules us quietly, and one of the quietest rulers is the fear of change. Not because change is always bad, but because it breaks the illusion that control can save us from grief. Read that again, inwardly. Control can organize pain, but it cannot prevent life from moving. Once you see that, something softens, not into weakness, into truth. You are not being asked to become careless. You are being asked to become conscious, to notice when your caution is wise, and when it is only old fear repeating itself in a more elegant voice. Today, choose one unresolved situation that has been living in your mind for too long, and give it a clear answer before the day ends. Write either a full yes or a full no. Send it. Do not explain it twice. Do not soften it into confusion. Let your decision become the place where your fear stops speaking for you. If you chose 5, this usually appears when your psyche is no longer satisfied with survival in its old form and begins to press for movement, truth, and a new order inside your life. Stay with this, because this choice is not quiet. It carries momentum. It carries the feeling that something in you has outgrown its old shape, even if another part still wants to delay the moment of change. This golden violin does not merely symbolize beauty or ambition. It symbolizes emergence. It symbolizes a self that is tired of hiding inside what is polished, acceptable, or familiar. In simple Jungian terms, this touches individuation, the long inner movement in which a person stops living only through roles, habits, or borrowed expectations, and begins to integrate what was split off, silenced, or postponed. That is why this choice often appears when your emotion cannot be reduced to one neat word. It may look like restlessness, but beneath it there is desire. It may look like pressure, but beneath it there is expansion. It may look like uncertainty, but beneath it there is a deeper truth that already knows the direction and is waiting for your courage to catch up. Pay attention to that. The established order in your life may still function, but some part of you no longer belongs to it in the same way. You may be continuing the routine, answering the same messages, keeping the same tone, carrying the same image, while inwardly feeling that your real life is standing just beyond a door you keep touching but not opening. This is where the tension lives. One part of you wants integration, another part wants permission, one part knows, another part stalls. The gift in this pattern is powerful. You may have vision, creative force, instinct, magnetism, and a strong inner sense that you were not made to remain small for too long. But the shadow of that same pattern is subtle. Sometimes you polish instead of acting. Sometimes you rehearse instead of beginning. Sometimes you postpone a decision because delay lets you keep the fantasy pure and untouched. Yet life does not transform through perfect timing. It transforms through committed movement. Here is a simple everyday scene. There is a conversation you have needed to have for weeks, maybe longer, or a habit you know no longer matches the person you are becoming, or a decision you revisit every night and avoid every morning. You tell yourself you need one more sign, one more day, one more surge of confidence. But what is really happening is this. Your old self is negotiating for more time. Here is the inner highlight. The fear is real, but so is the call. And the call is now stronger than the fear, even if only by a breath. That breath matters. Jung would say wholeness does not come from staying divided in a graceful way. It comes from allowing the denied part of the self to enter life consciously, not all at once, not dramatically for the sake of appearance, but truly, firmly in action. So this choice is not asking you to become reckless. It is asking you to stop worshipping delay. It is asking you to let your life know that you mean it. Today, choose one postponed decision, one avoided conversation, or one daily habit that no longer reflects who you are becoming, and take one small, irreversible step before the day ends. Send the message. Cancel the old commitment. Publish the draft. Remove the item. Set the date. Change the routine in a way that cannot be taken back without your full awareness. Let the step be small, but let it be real. That is how transformation begins, not as a performance, but as a quiet act of courage that makes the old pattern impossible to fully return to. What all 5 choices reveal is not just a different emotion, but the same deeper mechanism wearing different faces. One person avoids by becoming intense, another avoids by becoming distant, another avoids by becoming pleasing, another avoids by becoming guarded, another avoids by becoming suspended between vision and action. But underneath these different styles, the pattern is shared. There is repetition, there is hidden fear. There is a part of the self trying to protect something tender by turning it into a role, a rhythm, a habit, a defense. Stay with this, because this is where the reading becomes more honest. In Jungian language, the psyche does not bury a feeling and forget it. It buries a feeling and then reorganizes life around it. That is why the same kind of tension can return through different masks. What you call stress may be old grief. What you call caution may be fear of change. What you call patience may be avoidance. What you call self-control may be a frightened part of you trying to keep the inner world from spilling out. This is the symbolic truth behind the violins. A violin only sings because tension is held in a precise way, and people often do the same with emotion. They turn pressure into identity. They turn survival into personality. They turn an old wound into a familiar pattern, and then wonder why life keeps repeating itself in slightly different forms. That is why your choice matters. It is not a final label, it is a doorway. It shows how your inner world has learned to create coherence from pain, and that is not failure, that is adaptation. That is the psyche doing its best to protect you until you are ready to see more. And now you are seeing more. That is the accomplishment hidden inside this moment. You are not simply hearing a description, you are recognizing a mechanism. You are noticing where the shadow has been shaping your reactions from behind the curtain. You are beginning to separate who you are from the pattern you learned. That is a new beginning, even if it feels quiet. In folk psychology, people often think the problem is the emotion itself. But very often the real difficulty is the relationship we build with emotion when we are afraid of what it might cost us. So we delay, repeat, defend, perform, withdraw, overgive, control, or dream without moving. Yet once the pattern becomes visible, it starts to loosen. Once it is named, it is no longer running the whole room in secret. That is where integration begins. Not in perfection, not in dramatic transformation, in honesty. In the simple moment when you realize that your usual way of coping is not the whole truth of who you are. Read that slowly inwardly. Your pattern is real, but it is not your essence. Your defense helped you, but it does not have to become your destiny. That is why I say the real test begins after this video, because recognition without action quickly turns back into repetition. Today, choose one behavior from your reading that you know you repeat when you feel emotionally threatened. Write down what fear is hiding underneath it, and take one small visible action that interrupts the cycle before the day ends. Send the message, make the decision, set the boundary. Admit the feeling. Let the new beginning be simple, but let it be real. Because the moment you act with awareness instead of habit, you are no longer only surviving your pattern. You are becoming conscious inside it, and that is where change truly starts. Before you leave, do not let this become just another moment that touched you and then disappeared. If something in this reading felt personal, if one part of it stayed with you, if you recognized yourself in a way that was a little uncomfortable but also strangely relieving, then stay connected to that feeling for one more moment. Please indicate your chosen number in the comments. Please type your name. That small act matters more than it seems, because when you put your choice into words, you stop treating it like a passing impression and begin giving it a place inside your real life. That is where reflection becomes meaning. That is where this stops being only a symbolic exercise and starts becoming something you can carry with you. And if one sentence, one image, or one truth in this video reached something quiet inside you, like this, let that be your way of saying that this message found you at the right time. Subscribe, not as a routine click, but as a promise to keep going deeper into what your mind hides, what your heart repeats, and what your inner world is still trying to reveal. Some patterns only become visible when you return again and again with honesty. Some answers only arrive when you are ready to see yourself without turning away. So do not break the thread now. Stay with this journey a little longer. Let this be the point where curiosity becomes awareness, and awareness becomes change. You have already taken the first step by choosing. You have already opened a door by staying until the end. Now keep moving while the feeling is still alive in you. Watch the next test on your screen right now. It may reveal the very layer that this one only began to uncover, and sometimes the next symbol says what the first one could only hint at.